Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you joining us.
Absolutely.
And I want to ask you a question right out of the gate. How much of what you think you know about the classic stories you grew up with, how much of that is actually just a very successful PR campaign for the victors?
Oh, that is the perfect way to frame it.
Right, because today we have a truly spectacular mission. We are going to completely dismantle and examine a massive cultural cornerstone.
We really are.
I want you to mentally take the singing mice, the sparkling glass slippers, that whole magical pumpkin carriage thing, and just throw them right out the window.
Toss them. Gone.
Gone. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the source material of a novel. The book name is Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hochhauser.
Such an incredible text.
It really is. And our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this fascinating source material, because this is a book that entirely shatters the traditional Cinderella myth.
By telling the story from the other side.
Exactly. From the perspective of the infamous wicked stepmother, Etheldreda, or Ethel.
It's a completely paradigm-shifting text, and it's wonderful to be diving into it with you today because we are so accustomed to the cultural shorthand of the wicked stepmother.
Oh, totally. She's the ultimate villain.
Right. She's usually presented as this flat, two-dimensional figure of just pure malice. She's bad just because she's bad.
Yeah, no real reason given.
But what Hochhauser does is take that archetype and she gives her a heartbeat. She gives her a history, a terrifying economic reality, and most importantly, a desperate motivation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because from the very first page of this book, you are thrown into a world that is gritty, it is terrifying, and profoundly unfair.
Very unfair.
If you are expecting a fairy tale about a girl passively waiting for a prince to solve her problems, you're in the wrong place. This is a story about raw survival.
It's about the unyielding lengths a mother will go to.
Yes, the lengths she will go to in order to protect her children in a world that is completely rigged against women.
What's fascinating here is how the text explores the mechanics of history-making, because the narrative we've all inherited frames Ethel as a monster.
The ultimate monster.
But when you actually examine her actions through the lens of her historical and economic circumstances, that supposed female villainy looks very different.
It really does.
It often reveals itself to be a desperate attempt at survival in a deeply patriarchal society. The systems of power are explicitly designed to keep women vulnerable.
And dependent.
Exactly. And when a woman decides to manipulate those systems, to basically game the rules to keep her family alive, society immediately brands her a monster.
But let me push back on that a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for you listening right now.
Go for it.
Because when we think of Lady Tremaine, we think of a woman living in luxury who is just needlessly cruel to her stepdaughter.
The velvet cushions, the pristine castle.
Right. But Hochhauser completely flips the script on that assumption.
Yeah.
Right in the opening scene. We don't find Ethel lounging around.
Not at all.
It is the crack of dawn, it is freezing cold, and she is sneaking through the damp woods.
With her skirts tied up?
Literally tied up between her legs so she can physically jump across a muddy stream.
Yeah.
She is actively, illegally poaching game on royal land.
It's a brilliantly stark opening image. It immediately recalibrates our understanding of who this woman is.
Yeah, she's got dirt under her fingernails.
And she is acutely aware of the danger. The text doesn't shy away from the gruesome punishments for outlaws in this era.
No, it is graphic.
We're talking about fingers being brutally severed for thieving, or lips being cut out for lying.
Just horrifying stuff.
These aren't abstract threats, they are the reality of royal justice. And yet, Ethel used the darkness of the woods and that physical danger as a fair trade.
Because she needs the food.
She's willing to risk mutilation for a few hours of freedom from the watchful eyes of society.
And literally to put food on the table. Because that's the visceral stakes here. She's hunting. And she has her hunting companion, Lucy.
Ah, Lucy.
And I gotta say, Lucy is not a cute little Disney songbird that lands on your finger. Lucy is a peregrine falcon.
A predator.
The level of detail Hochhauser puts into the mechanics of this bird and the hunting process is incredible.
The research on display is meticulous. We get a very grounded breakdown of medieval falconry.
The text mentions the jesses, right?
Yes, the jesses are these thick leather straps permanently attached to the bird's legs, and we see the heavy leather gauntlet Ethel wears.
Which she absolutely needs.
Otherwise, the bird's talons would shred her forearm to ribbons.
Ouch.
And crucially, we learn about the plumed hood. It's a small leather cap used to completely cover the bird's eyes.
To blind it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Taking away its sight is the only reliable way to keep the falcon calm when it's not hunting. You have to understand, a falcon is essentially a creature of pure destructive instinct.
Right.
These tools, the hood, the jesses, the gauntlet, they're the only things binding that raw violence to human will.
I found myself highlighting that entire section.
Yeah.
Because Lucy the Falcon feels like the perfect mirror for Ethel herself.
Oh, absolutely.
Lucy is athletic, she has this body that functions like armor, and she is ruthlessly protective of her own survival. But at the end of the day, she is tethered.
Bound by the jesses.
Manipulated by the hood. Just as Ethel is bound and blinded by the rules of her high society.
That's a very astute connection, and the text actively leans into the brutality of that dynamic. There is no romanticizing nature here.
None. In Chapter 1, we watch Lucy dive and kill a rabbit in the blink of an eye.
It's not a pristine moment.
Ethel physically has to watch her beloved bird sink its talons into the bloody bowels of this screaming mammal. It is graphic,
Visceral.
but it serves a profound thematic purpose.
It does.
What really stuck out to me is how Ethel manages the aftermath of the kill. She can't just ask Lucy nicely to hand over the rabbit.
No, the bird won't listen to that.
She actually has to use a trick.
Yeah.
She quickly covers the bloody kill with wet leaves to hide it from the bird's sight.
And then the trade.
Right. She reaches into her pocket and offers Lucy a gizzard instead. It's a calculated trade-off.
Which perfectly encapsulates the text's underlying philosophy. The book argues that nature is a brutal, uncompromising system of balance.
Predators and prey.
For every life sustained, a death must occur. Lucy is trained to trade her hard-won prize for the lesser gizzard because that is the system she has been conditioned to accept.
And Ethel is navigating those exact same brutal systems.
Exactly. She does it in the mud of the woods, and she does it in the glittering drawing rooms of high society. The currency changes, but the brutality of the trade remains the same.
Speaking of those drawing rooms, we have to talk about her home, Bramley Hall.
The great facade.
Because the transition from the muddy woods back to the estate is where the massive, exhausting facade of Ethel's life really comes into focus.
Is exhausting.
If you were just walking up the long driveway, Bramley Hall looks magnificent. It has this intricate ironwork gate, beautiful diamond-patterned timbers on the exterior.
A picture of aristocratic wealth.
And then the book takes you inside. And it's a completely different story.
The contrast is deeply stressful to read. The grandeur is literally skin deep. Inside, the roof leaks in 3 different places.
Causing the floorboards to rot.
The walls are stripped bare. We learn that over the years, Ethel has been slowly selling off every painting, every decent piece of furniture,
Every jewel she owns.
just to keep the household financially afloat.
Which completely recontextualizes the illegal poaching. At first I was thinking, why is a lady risking getting her hands chopped off for a rabbit?
But then it clicks.
It clicks. She is risking her life in the mud so that she doesn't have to spend her desperately hoarded pennies on butcher's meat.
Because she needs those pennies for something else.
She needs to buy a single pound of refined sugar. She needs to buy fine lace to sew onto her daughter's sleeves.
And as a modern reader, it's easy to look at that and think, wow, she has terrible priorities. Fix the roof instead of buying sugar.
Right, it looks like pure vanity.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces you to ask a difficult question about your own life. Think about the lengths you might go to maintain appearances.
If your survival depended on it.
Exactly. If your absolute survival and your children's survival depended on your neighbors believing you were successful.
For Ethel, buying expensive sugar to serve to guests is not vanity. It is a highly calculated survival tactic.
She calls respectability a lifeboat.
A lifeboat. She views it as the only vessel that will float her girls along the tides of societal stability straight on to the secure banks of marriage.
Because if you look poor in her world, if the smell of desperation clings to you, society is completely unforgiving.
They will cast you out to starve.
The operating philosophy of Ethel's life is that the world is actively unkind to those who don't follow its aesthetic rules.
So the house can be crumbling to dust.
But if the chandeliers are polished and the dresses are perfectly pleated, society will accept them. They'll be invited to the right dinners.
The facade is the only barricade standing between her daughters and ruin.
Absolute ruin.
But how did she get so obsessed with these rules? Because she wasn't always like this, which is one of the biggest surprises of the book.
We get to explore Ethel's youth.
She wasn't born into this suffocating nobility. She was actually the daughter of a brewer.
Her origins are firmly rooted in the working class, or more accurately, the yeomanry.
Which means what exactly for the listener?
The yeomanry refers to a class of people who were freeborn and owned their own land or businesses, but they were commoners.
Okay.
They straddled the very precarious line between manual tradespeople and the lower gentry. They had money, but absolutely no noble blood.
And young Ethel loved that life. She was a total tomboy.
Deeply happy.
Her days were dirty and dusty. She followed her father around the brewery, learning practical physical skills. She learned how to butcher and salt meat.
She learned how to mix daub.
Yes, daub, which is this mixture of clay, soil, straw, and literal animal dung. And she used it to repair the walls of their outbuildings.
And during this time, her father taught her a core life lesson. It becomes her ultimate mantra.
You start with the tools you have.
That single phrase is the skeleton key to unlocking her entire character.
When she was a child mixing daub, those tools were literal. Wood, clay, salt, dung.
But as an adult, when she is violently thrust into the treacherous politics of the noble court, those tools evolve.
The tools become etiquette, manipulation, secrets.
Weaponized charm.
But the transition from being a happy, mud-covered brewer's daughter to a silk-wearing lady of the court. It wasn't a magical makeover montage.
It was brutal.
When she turns 12, her father decides to elevate his family's status, so he hires a tutor named Agatha to prepare Ethel for the upper-class marriage market.
And Agatha is the stuff of nightmares.
A book describes her as constantly smelling faintly of sour milk, which she attempted to mask with this incredibly pungent lilac water.
Just the sensory description alone makes you want to back away from her.
Agatha is a terrifying figure because she represents the embodiment of societal enforcement.
She is the patriarchy's police force, operated by a woman.
She wasn't just hired to teach Ethel how to hold a delicate fan, or the proper angle to scoop soup away from her body.
She was hired to literally beat the wildness out of this young girl.
I was physically wincing reading those chapters. The text mentions that Agatha taught Ethel exactly how many sharp raps a knuckle can take from a wooden ruler before the skin splits and bleeds.
It's physical conditioning.
She taught her that if you grab another person's arm too firmly, it leaves a sickly yellow bruise that betrays your lack of composure.
It was abuse, sanctioned by society in the name of refinement.
It forces us to examine toxic femininity within these historical structures.
Agatha is perpetuating the violence she likely endured herself. It's the only way she knows how to manufacture a proper lady.
So when we look at adult Ethel, we realize that etiquette was never a natural state of grace for her. It is a deeply ingrained trauma response.
She explicitly states at one point that being a titled woman, wearing the tight dresses and the jewels, feels like wearing a carapace.
Like a hard insectoid shell. All the curtsies, the rigidly straight posture, these aren't manners. They are defensive maneuvers drilled into her through pain.
And you have to ask, why would a father subject his beloved daughter to that? And why would she accept it?
Because the alternative is a literal horror story. The text provides these gruesome stakes through stories the women whisper to each other as warnings.
And these stories hit hard.
Ethel recalls a specific unwed maidservant in her village who got pregnant. This young woman was found beaten to death, and the text specifically notes she was bruised purple at the belly.
A horrific attempt to induce a miscarriage.
Or punish her so she couldn't name the father, who was likely someone with power.
She also remembers seeing a pregnant woman crawling in the dirt in active labor. And the local town constable didn't help her?
No, he just threw her over the back of a horse and carted her across the county line so their town wouldn't have to take financial responsibility.
These anecdotes function almost like dark fairy tales, but they are entirely grounded in the brutal economic reality of the era.
Women without the protection of a man, a father, a husband, or a wealthy son were completely disposable.
There was no social safety net. If you fell out of societal favor, you starved. Or you were subjected to extreme violence.
The most chilling example for me was the story of the widow. Her husband died and left her and her daughter with absolutely nothing, no property rights, no money.
Their only option for basic caloric survival was prostitution.
And eventually, both of their bodies were found dumped in a shallow washing stream, and the daughter's forehead had been brutally branded with a hot iron.
When you, as a reader, absorb those stories, suddenly Ethel's intense obsession with lace sleeves makes complete sense.
She is terrified.
She has every right to be. The trauma of those stories is the engine of her paranoia. And this brings us back to that overarching concept of nature.
The falcon and the rabbit.
Exactly. The text posits that nature is fundamentally about balance. Predators eat prey, the strong survive.
But it argues that a mother defies that balance.
A mother is not interested in the natural order if the natural order dictates that her children are the prey.
She actively tips the scales.
She is entirely, ruthlessly biased. Ethel's maternal instinct becomes this overwhelming force that actively resists the crushing balance of the patriarchal world.
But I want to make sure we don't paint her as this cynical survivor from day one, because she learned that brutal lesson the hard way, through the grand tragedy of her life, which was her first marriage.
Let's talk about Henry Tremaine.
Because honestly, this part of the book breaks your heart. This was actually a genuine love match.
It's a vital piece of context. Ethel wasn't always hardened and manipulative. After surviving Agatha's training, she met Henry Tremaine.
And Henry was the son of a wildly wealthy merchant family.
This introduces an interesting dynamic regarding wealth. The Tremaines weren't royalty, but they were mind-bogglingly rich from trade.
The book notes they were so wealthy they literally traveled with their own glass windows to install in the hunting lodges they rented.
Because standard parchment windows weren't good enough.
And they had an entire separate carriage outfitted just for their hunting falcons. And that is exactly how Ethel and Henry bond over the birds.
Henry was a third son, so he wasn't going to inherit the main estate, but he deeply respected Ethel.
He loved her tomboy nature, the part of her that Agatha tried to beat away.
There's that great scene where he kisses her for the first time, right after she physically wrestles his spooked horse to a standstill in the mud.
It was a true partnership of equals, built on mutual respect.
However, this beautiful relationship introduces the catalyst for Ethel's ultimate downfall and the architect of her misery.
Her childhood friend, Sigrid.
Sigrid Camellia White.
She is the quintessential mean girl, but with massive systemic power.
She is wealthy, she has formal equestrian training, she wears these heavy brocade dresses, she doesn't have to sew herself.
And she decides she wants Henry. Not because she loves him, but simply because she sees Ethel, the brewer's daughter, coveting him.
Sigrid literally tells Ethel to her face that a jewel is only worth what people are willing to pay for it.
She views human beings purely as status symbols to be hoarded.
Sigrid represents the absolute entitlement of the upper classes. She expects to get what she wants simply because she has always gotten what she wants.
But the narrative throws a wrench in her plans because Henry actually chooses Ethel.
He defies his family's wish and marries the brewer's daughter. It's a moment of triumph for Ethel.
But it doesn't last, because Sigrid gets the ultimate twisted revenge. Shortly after Ethel's wedding, she receives a letter from Sigrid.
Dripping with toxic sweetness.
Sigrid gloats that she isn't upset about Henry anymore because she has secured a marriage to the king's first son.
And she writes that chilling line, "Sometimes luck is by design."
Sigrid is going to be the queen of the entire realm.
And the repercussions of Sigrid's ascension are immediate and devastating for the Tremaine family.
This isn't just a social snub. Sigrid wages total economic warfare.
Once she is queen, the Tremaine family suddenly loses all of their lucrative royal charters.
Now, to explain for the listener, royal charters were essentially government-granted monopolies.
Exactly. Having a charter meant you were the only family legally allowed to import a certain spice or trade a certain fabric. Losing those charters instantly cripples their income.
And it doesn't stop there. They are hit with massive new tariffs on their trade ships, and they are slammed with exorbitant fines for supposedly breaking obscure shipping regulations.
Regulations that were literally never enforced before Sigrid took the crown.
The crown systematically and intentionally bankrupts the Tremaine family.
And then the ultimate crushing blow falls. Henry dies while traveling to try and salvage one of their last trade routes.
Ethel is suddenly left a widow, pregnant with her second child, trapped in a family that is rapidly losing all its money.
And worse, it's a family that never wanted her in the first place.
And this is where you might ask, well, why doesn't her father-in-law help her? He had the glass windows.
But the Tremaine patriarch is bleeding money. He coldly informs Ethel that to cut costs, he plans to immediately marry off her daughters, Rosie and Mathilde.
And these girls are only 7 and 8 years old at this point.
He views them not as his beloved granddaughters, but as rapidly depreciating assets.
It is the absolute commodification of women.
To the patriarch, the girls are just lines on a ledger. That horrific realization is the exact moment Ethel is radicalized.
She realizes she has to take drastic action to save her little girls from being sold off as child brides. So she orchestrates a second marriage for herself.
She targets a wealthy, titled widower named Lord Robert Bramley.
And it is purely transactional. She essentially trades her youth and sharp mind for the perceived security of Bramley Hall.
She thinks she has found her lifeboat, but it turns out to be a massive trap.
The revelation of this trap is one of the most stressful parts of the novel. Robert dies shortly after they are married, and Ethel discovers the truth about his finances.
Robert hadn't paid taxes on the massive Bramley estate in years.
The estate is practically underwater,
Yeah.
drowning in unpaid levies and compound interest owed to the crown.
The title of Lady Bramley is functionally meaningless because the sprawling, leaking house and the crushing debt are one and the same.
She is financially shackled to a sinking ship. And to make a terrible situation even worse, upon Robert's death, she is now the sole legal guardian of his daughter from his first marriage.
Elin.
And I want to spend a moment here because the dynamic between the three daughters in this crumbling house is fascinating.
It really is.
You have Ethel's biological daughters, Rosamund or Rosie and Mathilde. These two have grown up watching their mother hustle.
They've adapted to poverty.
Rosie is deeply romantic, but she's also incredibly practical because she's an absolute wizard of a seamstress.
She literally keeps the family clothed by ripping apart ancient dresses from the attic and redesigning them.
And Mathilde is the pragmatist. She manages the household ledgers, she hunts in the woods with Lucy the Falcon.
She is fiercely loyal to the survival of their specific family unit.
They are active participants in their own survival. And then there is Ellen.
Elin represents the antithesis of everything Ethel has had to become.
Ellen refuses to lift a finger to help the household. She literally faints when asked to do basic chores like fetching water.
She spends her days sequestered in a peach-colored nursery, obsessively reading a tattered book of female virtues.
She is essentially sitting in a burning house, waiting for her fairy tale life to magically resume.
And I think a lot of readers might initially judge Ethel for how she treats Elin. They might ask, isn't she just replicating the abuse Agatha inflicted on her?
But when you look at the economics of it, Ethel's resentment isn't arbitrary wickedness.
Ellen embodies the passive femininity that society rewards, but which is utterly useless for actual survival.
And there is a massive financial thorn in Ethel's side regarding Ellen. The text reveals that Ellen actually has a substantial dowry from her mother's family.
But legally, that money is locked in an untouchable trust until Ellen marries.
So Ethel and her biological daughters are literally scrubbing floors on their hands and knees, eating meager stews, and illegally poaching rabbits in the mud just to survive.
While knowing there's a pile of gold locked in a bank account that belongs to the girl upstairs who refuses to even wash her own teacup.
It breeds a deep, toxic, and entirely understandable resentment, which perfectly sets the stage for the inciting incident of the whole drama, the royal invitation.
I want you to picture this. They are living in this rotting house, stressing over pennies, when suddenly you hear the blare of a horn.
The royal carriage arrives at Bramley Hall. It is a massive spectacle. Everyone in the county knows the prince is of marriageable age.
So the assumption is that the palace is scouting for a wife. The arrival of the carriage feels like a lifeline being thrown to a drowning family.
But when the messenger unrolls the scroll, it is revealed to be a highly targeted, incredibly cruel surgical strike.
The invitation to the royal ball is explicitly extended to the Honorable Elin of Bramley and her guardian.
Rosie and Mathilde are deliberately, conspicuously left out.
It's a gut punch.
And Ethel knows exactly who is pulling the strings. It's Queen Sigrid, reaching out across the decades to twist the knife she planted years ago.
And here's where Ethel's character really shines. She doesn't just sit in the parlor and cry about it.
No, she marches right up to the royal palace and demands an audience with the queen.
This confrontation scene is an absolute masterclass in psychological warfare. Hochhauser writes it with such palpable tension.
Queen Sigrid receives Ethel in a lush, private salon. And what is Sigrid doing? She is casually, messily eating a lemon cake.
She forces Ethel, a woman who is starving, to stand there and grovel.
She forces Ethel to explicitly, verbally beg for her daughters to be added to the guest list, purely so Sigrid can enjoy the power dynamic.
And the physical description of Sigrid in this scene is so telling. She's dripping in wealth, surrounded by guards.
But when she smiles this malicious smile at Ethel notices a very specific detail. Sigrid has a gray, decaying tooth right near the front of her mouth.
That dead tooth is a brilliant, subtle literary device. In an era before modern dentistry, even royalty suffered from rot, especially given their access to refined sugar.
But symbolically.
Symbolically, it represents that despite the velvet walls and the absolute power, there is a fundamental, inescapable rot at the very core of the palace.
The monarchy is decaying from the inside out, no matter how much sugar they consume.
Sigrid ultimately agrees to invite Rosie and Mathilde, but she doesn't do it out of kindness.
She does it purely because she thinks it will be hilarious to watch these poor country mice embarrass themselves.
And while Ethel is leaving this demoralizing meeting, her blood boiling, she runs into a man named Otto Abensur in the palace corridors.
Otto is the royal counselor, and this is a critical intersection in the narrative.
Because Otto is the exact same man Ethel encountered in the woods during her poaching expedition in Chapter 1.
He was out riding early and saw her covered in mud, holding a dead, bleeding rabbit.
He knows the grim reality behind her polite, courtly facade.
But the tension is that he doesn't expose her to the queen. He keeps her secret. Even though his body language makes it clear, he doesn't think much of her desperate social climbing.
But Ethel doesn't care what he thinks. She got the invitation.
Now she faces an impossible task. She has to actually get 3 girls ready for a royal ball with 0 money.
And here is where Ethel goes into full mastermind mode. She realizes she cannot rely on fate. She has to begin actively manufacturing luck.
Because she knows, as Sigrid maliciously taught her, that luck is often by design.
But the preparation requires extreme, heartbreaking sacrifice. Ellen, of course, refuses to do the dirty work of collecting fireplace ashes to sell to the rag and bone man.
Wait, I need to stop you there. For the listener, can you explain what a rag and bone man is?
Certainly. In historical pre-industrial economies, absolutely nothing was wasted. A rag and bone man was a merchant who traveled around buying household waste.
Like what?
Old rags would be sold to paper mills. Animal bones were boiled down to make glue or ground up for fertilizer.
Oh, wow.
And wood ash from fireplaces was incredibly valuable because it was the primary ingredient used to make lye, which was essential for soap.
So Ethel is trying to sell literal garbage from her fireplace just to scrape together a few copper coins.
Exactly. And because Ellen won't help, and the ash money isn't enough, Ethel has to make a devastating choice to buy the fine fabric required for Ellen's dress.
Because Ellen's appearance reflects on the whole family.
Ethel has to visit a pawnbroker and sell her only memento of her dead mother, a delicate shell cameo necklace.
It's a profound sacrifice made for a girl who doesn't even appreciate it.
It highlights the agonizing reality of the sunk cost fallacy. Ethel has invested so much of her life into this facade that she cannot stop now. She will burn her own history to keep the lifeboat afloat.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Ethel doesn't just buy the dresses and wait for the night of the ball to hope someone asks her daughters to dance.
She takes proactive, aggressive action.
She uses her network of gossiping servants to find out exactly which road Prince Simeon will be hunting on later that week.
And then she takes the girls, dresses them in their new gowns, puts them in their rickety carriage, drives to that exact rural road, and intentionally breaks her own carriage wheel in a ditch.
It is a brilliantly staged ambush. She sets up a picturesque, seemingly helpless picnic right by the wreckage.
When the prince's hunting party inevitably comes galloping across them, her daughters look like beautiful, helpless maidens stranded in a sunlit meadow.
And the crazy part is, it totally works. Simeon stops his horse. He is immediately charmed by Rosie.
He even reaches out and touches her hair, which is a massive breach of propriety, but signals intense interest.
And a few days later, Otto Abensur actually shows up at Bramley Hall delivering a gift from the prince. A heavy, expensive oil painting of apples.
It feels like a massive, undeniable victory. It creates a powerful, false sense of security for the reader.
It makes you believe that perhaps the fairy tale narrative might actually work out.
Which makes the reality of the ball so much more crushing when it finally arrives.
Let's talk about this ball, because it is the ultimate grand illusion.
The author uses such vivid, overwhelming descriptions that you feel almost claustrophobic reading it.
Sensory overload. We learned about the mandatory 3-yard silk trains that the girls have to navigate without tripping.
And the towering, heavy ostrich feathers violently pinned into their elaborate hairstyles.
Giving them headaches. And the food. There are elaborate, towering sugar sculptures of exotic fruits that no one is allowed to eat.
There's a massive banquet table serving roasted peacock, feathers and all.
Displayed right next to a whole roasted pig. And the drink they are serving is called white soup, which the text describes as a warm punch made of heavily spiced veal broth, thick cream, and ground almonds.
It sounds incredibly rich and, honestly, slightly nauseating.
Totally nauseating.
It's the absolute pinnacle of performative wealth. Everyone is playing a highly stressful role. It is an environment explicitly designed by the crown to intimidate the lesser nobility.
Ethel is standing on the sidelines, sweating in her heavy dress, feeling this agonizing mix of maternal pride and deep anxiety,
And to get away from the noise, she slips behind some heavy velvet drapes.
and inadvertently overhears a hushed conversation between Otto Abencer and Queen Sigrid.
Otto delivers the devastating blow. He plainly tells the queen that Ethel's daughters are not suitable.
And the chilling part is that Sigrid coldly agrees, stating she will personally put an end to any lingering interest the prince might have in Rosie.
In an instant, Ethel's entire carefully orchestrated triumph collapses. Her daughters are rejected simply because their bloodline and bank account are deemed insufficient by the crown.
Ethel is reeling. Everything she sacrificed for is gone. But she refuses to just stay in the dark and accept defeat. She needs to know why.
Earlier in the week, she had taken in a desperate lady's maid named Morwen, who used to work at the palace.
Ethel sneaks out of the ballroom, corners Morwen in an abandoned bedroom, and aggressively interrogates her. It reads like a true crime interrogation.
And Morwen drops an absolute bomb. Morwen reveals that Prince Simeon is not the charming hero he portrays in public. He's a violent brute.
The text implies a dark history of his behavior toward women that the palace constantly covers up.
Furthermore, Morwen reveals that the entire premise of the ball is a sham. It's not a genuine search for a political alliance.
So why are they spending fortunes on peacock and white soup to hold it? Morwen points Ethel toward a name, Princess Hema.
This is Simeon's younger sister, who has mysteriously vanished from public life over the last year.
Ethel sneaks through the dark palace labyrinth and manages to find Hema locked away in a secluded garden. And the secret is revealed. Hema is heavily pregnant out of wedlock.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer horror of the royal family scheme finally becomes clear. A royal princess having a bastard child is a scandal that could destabilize the monarchy.
Meanwhile, Prince Simeon is known behind closed doors as a monster, so powerful noble families refuse to give him their daughters.
So what does a correct monarchy do? They throw a massive, glittering ball and invite all the naive country girls who don't know the palace secrets.
It's need to find a gullible, easily controlled girl with a decent enough title to look legitimate.
They plan to marry her to Simeon immediately in a rushed ceremony. And then, a few months later, quietly pass off Hema's illegitimate baby as Simeon and his new wife's royal heir.
It is a breathtakingly cruel plot that solves two massive royal crises with one sacrificial lamb.
And they realize that Ellen is the perfect candidate. Ellen, who lives her entire life dictated by a book of passive female virtues.
Who faints at conflict.
Exactly. She is the ultimate pliable target. They will marry her, take the baby, and trap her in an abusive marriage forever.
Ethel is horrified. She manages to confront Queen Sigrid privately about this. And the craziest part, Sigrid doesn't even deny it.
She just looks at Ethel and delivers this chilling monster justification. She tells Ethel, "We are monsters raising more monsters. Have you ever loved a single thing more than your own child?"
This exchange raises an important question, and it truly is the thematic climax of the novel.
Sigrid forces Ethel to look in a dark mirror. Sigrid is doing for her children exactly what Ethel has been doing for her daughters on a smaller scale, breaking the rules and destroying others to ensure her own child's survival.
The morality of the world is shown to be entirely relative to maternal instinct.
But the stakes here are immediate life and death. Because while Ethel is discovering all of this, Elin actually runs away.
Completely swept up in her fairy tale delusions, she sneaks out of the ball to a secluded inn with Simeon, truly believing that he loves her and wants to romantically elope.
She is happily skipping right into the jaws of the trap, and this event triggers a profound psychological shift in Ethel.
For years, she has deeply resented Ellen, viewed her as a useless burden.
Elin's dowry has been locked away while Ethel's family starved. By all logical accounts, Ethel should just let her go. Letting Elin marry the prince would unlock the dowry.
But I have to ask, as a reader, why does she care now? Why does Ethel risk everything to stop this?
Because her maternal instinct overrides her resentment. She realizes that her core mission wasn't just to elevate her biological daughters, it was to survive a world that destroys women.
She looks at Elin not as an annoying stepdaughter, but as another vulnerable girl about to be fed to the wolves of the patriarchy.
She realizes she cannot let any girl under her roof suffer the fate of the women in those whispered village stories.
So in this incredible alliance, Ethel teams up with Otto Abencer. They steal horses and race into the night to save her.
And Otto's involvement is crucial. Despite his cynical nature, he is fundamentally disgusted by the stark reality of the plan when faced with its immediate execution on an innocent girl.
Together they form this gritty duo, riding through the freezing mud, leaving the glittering facade behind them to intercept the prince.
They bust into the inn, and it is the furthest thing from a romantic hideaway.
Simeon has stashed Ellen in a freezing, flea-infested buttery storeroom while he drinks in the tavern. Ethel kicks the door open and shatters Ellen's illusions right there in the dark.
She forces Ellen to physically look around at the dirt, the fleas, the cold. She tells her that a true prince would never hide her in a filthy back room without a proper public marriage ceremony surrounded by her family.
Is the brutal, necessary dismantling of the fairy tale narrative.
Ethel gives Ellen the agonizing gift of harsh reality. She rescues her not from a literal dragon, but from the insidious monster of a disastrous, abusive marriage.
They wrap Ellen in a cloak and bring her home. And this leads us to the end of the narrative arc, and what I think is a completely new, far more satisfying kind of happily ever after.
Ellen is saved from the monster, traumatized, but her eyes are open.
Rosie is heartbroken that the handsome prince turned out to be a villain, but she is safe in her own bed.
And we see the girls begin to forge their own authentic paths, free from the suffocating pressure of the royal marriage market.
Rosie leans into her immense talent and becomes a highly sought-after seamstress, earning her own financial independence.
Mathilde takes over the estate's ledgers entirely and fully masters falconry, learning to fly Lucy with the same ruthless grace her mother did.
And Ethel, the woman who started it all. Ethel takes all the immense trauma of her life and she finally revises the rulebook.
She literally throws away Ellen's tattered book of passive female virtues into the fire. She realizes that her fierce will to survive wasn't a sin, it was her absolute superpower.
She imparts a new, hard-won wisdom to her three daughters. The text states it beautifully in the closing pages. You do not need to be afraid. You do not have to be good. You are the scariest thing in the woods.
It is a complete, triumphant reclamation of the wicked stepmother identity. She accepts that in order to protect her family, she must fully embrace her own ferocity.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? I think it challenges us to look at the media we consume and the histories we are taught.
How often do we just passively accept the narrative we're handed?
We are told by the narrator who the hero is and who the villain is. But when we look at the wicked stepmother through the lens of economic desperation, the loss of her own agency, and her fierce maternal ferocity, she stops looking like a one-dimensional villain.
She starts looking like an absolute survivor. It's a vital shift in perspective. Lady Tremaine argues that marriage, security, and happily ever afters aren't born of fairy godmother magic.
They are complex negotiations.
And in a deeply flawed world, they often involve brutal compromises. So I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to consider today.
Look at the stories you've inherited in your own life, the expectations placed upon you by your culture or your family.
Are you playing the role of the passive princess waiting in a tower to be chosen?
Or are you willing to do what it takes to break the rules and become the scariest thing in the woods to protect what you truly love?
Such a powerful thought to leave on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hochhauser. We hope you never look at a glass slipper or a wicked stepmother the exact same way again. Stay curious, question the narrative, and we'll catch you next time.